Hello and a very good day, a very good morning, and a very good afternoon, depending on the region you're located at. My name is Abhilash, and I am from Manage Engine, a division of Zoho Corporation. My name is Abhilash, and I am from the AD Solutions, the Active Directory Solutions team here at Manage Engine, and I would be your presenter for today. Now, before we actually get started, before we actually jump into today's webinar, I would like to thank you all for joining in. Thank you so much for taking out the time, and thank you for being a part of today's webinar. So yes, today's webinar's topic is Limit Active Directory Attack Radius with Efficient Management Practices. Right now, the whole reason I chose to speak about this topic today is because efficiently and effectively managing your Active Directory can come a long way in protecting your organization against security breaches. Right now, you may have the strictest of firewall rules. You may have set up all the latest security protocols. You may have updated all of your systems, your in-house systems, to the latest operating system. You may have installed all the latest security patches required. But if the way you manage your Active Directory is not secure, if the way you manage your Active Directory is not efficient or is not good, that could lead to a security breach. So let's go ahead and jump into today's agenda. Right? So let's start off with Active Directory mismanagement. Now, I said that Active Directory mismanagement is crucial to maintain security within your organization. So let's go ahead and see a few statistics, right? A few live scenarios where Active Directory mismanagement is actually leaving organizations vulnerable to security breaches. In the second part of today's webinar, let's go ahead, deep dive, and understand what the attack radius is all about. Now, the title is Limit Active Directory Attack Radius, right? So let's go ahead and see what the attack radius is all about. In the third part of today's webinar, I will be showing you a live security attack simulation. Now, this is going to be a fun activity, right? The reason I'm doing the simulation is just to prove my earlier point where I said that if the way you manage your Active Directory is not secure, that's potentially giving an attacker an open gateway to enter into your organization's network. And after the attack simulation, we will employ a step-by-step approach where first we will learn to gain insights into our infrastructure. That's right, valuable insights where mismanagement vulnerabilities commonly occur, where mismanaged permissions commonly occur. And once we gain the insights, we will fix these problems. We will fix all mismanaged permissions within Active Directory. Post which, we will also secure our permissions, and by this, I mean our permissions on our Active Directory objects, our security objects, and our files and folders, and finally, just to have a backup plan, to have a safety net, to rise back up should something unfortunate or catastrophic happen, we will set up complete backup and recovery. So, Active Directory mismanagement. Does it actually leave your organization or your company vulnerable to security breaches? Here are a few stats, right? Skyport Systems analysis finds that Active Directory mismanagement unknowingly exposes 90% of enterprises to security breaches. On June 30, 2019, the U.S. Patent and the Trademark Office, or the USPTO, was found to have an inadequate configuration of Active Directory. They allowed excessive access permissions. The credentials or the passwords used within the organization were not secure, and the credentials were not stored in a secure manner. Now, I can go on and on of the problems as to why Active Directory mismanagement can lead to security breaches or could put your organization's security at risk. But the bottom line here is that there is a serious disconnect between perception and reality. And most organizations are simply unaware of how vulnerable Active Directory already is. So let's go ahead and see what the attack radius is all about. Right? So this is how the attack radius potentially works. An attacker or a malicious actor potentially gains access to an end user system or a domain user system. right? So as soon as an attacker compromises a domain user's account, or when a domain user actually turns rogue, the next immediate step is to perform reconnaissance, right? Is to analyze and survey the domain, the organization infrastructure for vulnerabilities or for critical targets. And once an attacker is able to find a particular user or a particular group he wants to target, or an attacker is able to find a vulnerability or a mismanaged permission, the attacker will then take that vulnerability, or the attacker will take the critical target and exploit it to gain access to critical resources. For example, once an attacker finds a privileged user, the attacker could potentially conduct a password spray attack or a brute force attack on the privileged user. Or if an attacker finds out that an end user is a member of an administrative group, right, the attacker will then use that end user's account to perform further privilege escalation with an Active Directory. So my whole point here, the whole idea I'm trying to put forth here with all of this information is that the more mismanaged permissions you have, right, more opportunities for your attacker and also wider spread. So mismanaged permissions don't only cause a breach, but they also help in the spread of a breach. Now I keep saying attackers, hackers, and intruders and cyber attackers, but how do these people, how do malicious actors actually leverage mismanaged permissions? Here are a few ways malicious actors leverage mismanaged permissions in Active Directory. Number one, modify group memberships. Now this is something I always talk about, right? Your groups either make or break your Active Directory. Let me illustrate this with a simple example. Right? You have your domain admins group. You have your server operators group, and finally you have a group called IT support. Now your server operators is a member of the domain admins group because your server operators generally need to carry admin tasks around servers. Let's say the Citrix servers within your organization or your domain controllers within your organization. Right? The IT support group, for some reason, was added to the server operators group. Right? No one knows why. It was probably for a temporary reasons, but the IT support group is a member of server operators group, and the server operators group is a member of domain admins group. Now I'm pretty sure you see where I'm headed here. Through nested memberships or through indirect memberships, the IT support group has domain admin privilege. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a first example of a mismanaged permission with an Active Directory. Nested group memberships, right? When your end users have unnecessary admin group privileges. Problem number two, creating lots and lots of users. Now what do I mean by this, right? An attacker can potentially log in to your end user system or compromised end user system, or an end user may turn rogue. Now that user could potentially create and add backdoor users into Active Directory. Right? So the number of backdoor users an attacker has, the more an attacker can establish a foothold over your Active Directory. Now you might immediately ask me a question. If an attacker goes about creating backdoor users, will that not show up as a threat? A person who is monitoring the Windows event viewer or the Windows event logs, will the person not know that his Active Directory is actually under threat? But my answer to that question is no, because there are ways, there are attacks. For example, Mimikatz DC shadow attack, using which you can inject backdoor data, right? Backdoor entries into Active Directory, and your attackers will not have a clue about it. Point number three is your nested group grants, like I told before, right? Nested group memberships. Any user who is a member of an admin group, or any user who is also an indirect member of admin group. All of these users can be leveraged by an attacker to gain access to your organization's internal network. And finally, access to resources and data. An attacker can perform discovery, right, and find out users who have access to Active Directory security objects and files and folders across file servers within your organization. So these are 4 ways attackers can actually take advantage of mismanaged permissions. Modifying direct group memberships, creating lots and lots of users for persistence, use indirect or nested group memberships, and finally exploit your resources, your gold, your files and servers, and your security objects. Now, let's go ahead and actually perform a live security attack simulation. Now, just to remind you, the reason I'm doing this is to prove to you a simple point, right? A single mismanagement step, a single mismanagement permission is all an attacker needs to establish foothold within your organization's network. So let's go ahead and perform the attack. But before we get into it, here is a quick flow of how the attack is going to go. I will log in as an end user. Right now, this is a user with absolutely no privileges, or this is what Active Directory tells me. And once I log in, the next immediate step that I would do is perform reconnaissance or analyze the domain infrastructure for vulnerabilities. And once the reconnaissance part is done, I will install an MSI application, a Windows installer application, using which I will add a backdoor user to a privileged group. Any group, the admin group, the domain admins group, a group that has access to sensitive file and folder data. Now let's go ahead and actually perform the attack, right? So I will quickly head on to my VM right here. And now you can see that I have logged in as a user called Luna. Right now, Luna is a user who's got no privileges with an Active Directory. Now, let me quickly show you something. If I run a command called net user, Luna, this is what I get, right? These are Luna's group memberships within Active Directory, and we can see that Luna is not a privileged user of any kind. Just a standard domain user logging onto her domain join system, or at least that's what Active Directory tells me. Right, so now that I've logged on as Luna, let me go ahead and show you something. In order to perform the privilege escalation attack, using which I will add a backdoor user to the admin group, I will be using a script called PowerUp, which is right here. Now this script is freely available within the internet. All you have to do is go to Google, go to GitHub, get the script, and that's it. Save it as a PowerShell module, and you are good to go. Right, so once the script is in front of me, all I have to do now is simply shift to the desktop and run a command called import module /powerup.ps1. And once I click enter, you can see that the script has been imported. Now the next immediate command is going to be invoke all checks. So what the script is going to do now is that the script is potentially going to search Active Directory for Luna's privileges. Any way Luna can be exploited as an inside user. Could be unquoted service paths. It could be deployment credentials left in unattended installed files. It could be group memberships. Or it could be GPO options using which Luna is an admin somehow. Alright, so once I've run that, the next immediate step is to run a command called write user add MSI. And once I click enter, this will take about a second. You see now that user add.msi was written to user add.msi. What do I mean by this? Do you see this right here? This was not here when we started. Right, so using the PowerUp module, I as an end user, as Luna, was able to install an MSI application onto my desktop. So let me quickly open up the application and show you what I mean here. So I'm quickly running the setup file, and once I click confirm, check this out. Now I will be adding a user called backdoor_cyber-attacker. And this is the backdoor user's password, which is going to be password at 123. And once the group name is specified, in this case it's administrators, and I hit create, so once I hit create, what's going to happen is that the backdoor user will be added to the administrators group. Right, so let me quickly show you what just happened here. If I open up the application and hit yes, and given backdoor underscore, let's just call him me, all right? And once I give in a password, which is going to be password at 123 and administrators, and hit create, so this is what happens, right? User will be added to the administrators group. Now I am getting an unhandled exception error for some reason. That's because the account already exists. Perfect. So let me quickly show you something. If I quit this and if I run a command called net local group administrators, right? These are members of the administrators group, and you can see now that I have my backdoor attacker right here. Now, my backdoor underscore cyber attacker user was not being able to add it to the admin group. There was some error with the attack, but this is how attacks potentially function, right? You could simply install an MSI application, and using the MSI application, you can add a backdoor user to any group that you want. And similarly, you could leverage the same attack, right, to get the admin's plain text password. Now, how does this happen? In organizations where Labs is deployed, right? For those of you who do not know what Labs is a local administrator password solution, right, to potentially strengthen admin passwords across all entry points within an organization. So, using this attack, you can add a user to a group that has read access to the Labs admin password, and you know what's next, right? So once I'm able to add an attacker to a group that has read access to the Labs password, I can read all admin passwords within the organization. So how do we go about fixing this problem, right? We saw that this is how mismanagement vulnerabilities can lead to security breaches. So how do we go about fixing this? We need to employ a structured approach. So the first approach that we need to do is to gain insights and to fix them, right? Before you go about fixing anything, the first thing you need to do as an admin or a help desk is to gain sufficient visibility. So let's go ahead and see where to gain insights, right? Important places where insights have to be gained and how to fix these vulnerabilities if there are any vulnerabilities. So here are a few important places where you have to gain insights. Now, before I actually get to the solution, let me actually tell you that the only way to do this in Active Directory is by using the ADUC tool that you see right here, the world famous tool that all of us use on a daily basis, and the only other tool we have is PowerShell. Right now, I won't get into the details of this, but I will just leave you with these 2 points. Right? The ADUC tool is too monotonous. For instance, if I have to see group memberships of all of my users within this OU, the only way I can do it is to right-click on a user, head all the way into properties, and check the member of tab of every user. Right? So doing this for every individual user within my organization is a pretty cumbersome process. Now, the only other way I can do this is by using PowerShell. Now, PowerShell is a built-in tool that comes with all of your Windows systems, with every system starting from Windows 7. But let me tell you 2 things here, right? PowerShell has unprecedented access to your machine's inner cores, to unrestricted APIs, to basically everything. The whole purpose of PowerShell was to help admins automate tedious tasks. But the truth is, PowerShell is now being used as a cyber attack tool, right? Attackers are abusing PowerShell to gain access to your organization's internal network. And also, you can never trust the scripts that you find online. Now, let's say I find a script online that says find all my group memberships within Active Directory. And when I run the script using PowerShell, there is no way to confirm that the script is actually showing us the real data. And there is no way to confirm that the script is actually making the changes or querying for the changes that I want and not making any unwanted changes. So in order to use PowerShell, you need to be a scripting expert, and you need to be aware of the cyber attacks that come in with PowerShell, and you also need to be ready. So there are 2 ways using which you can view mismanaged permissions using the native tools. That's the ADUC tool and PowerShell. Right? Both of which have problems where ADUC is monotonous and PowerShell can lead to unwanted changes because you cannot trust the scripts that you find on the internet. And point number 2 is that PowerShell is being increasingly used as a cyber attack tool. So here are 6 important places where you can look for valuable insights, right? So the first place that I would ask you to look for is the group memberships within Active Directory. So how do you go about doing this? Like I said, the only way to do it using the native tools is by checking the member of tab using the ADUC tool or by using PowerShell. But by using AD Manager Plus, I can quickly log into the tool, right? And then jump into reports right here. And we've got something called groups for users and users in groups right here. All I have to do is simply select an option, select a group that I want, and all the memberships of that group will be right in front of me. Now let me show you something interesting, right? Let me quickly head back to my VM here, open up PowerShell, and run a command called net user Luna. Now these are Luna's memberships, right? Or at least that's what Active Directory tells me. Now let me show you a quick experiment. If I head into groups for users, all I have to do now is simply select a user, who's Luna in this case, and once I hit generate, all of Luna's group memberships will be pushed out right in front of me, right? And we know that Luna is a member of Marketing Interns, right? But little did we know that Marketing Interns is a member of Australia, and Australia is a member of AD Group, and AD Group is a member of Domain Admins. And via nested or indirect privileges, Luna happened to be a domain administrator that we didn't know about, right? And using the administrator privileges, Luna was able to install an application, that's right, an MSI application, to add a backdoor user to any group with an Active Directory. That's why I said monitoring group memberships is primary, because groups make or break your Active Directory. So this is how we can monitor group memberships using AD Manager Plus. I can select any number of users that I want. I can select any domain that I want, and we have the group membership right in front of us. And that's just not it. I can simply select the groups that I want the user's membership to be changed, and I can take the action directly from the place where I have generated the information. Right? So it's just not information generation, but also fixing the vulnerability from where you've generated the information. In this case, let's say delete the groups or move the groups. Right? Now I can modify the end result of the report as well, where I can add in the columns or the attributes that I wish to see, or I could export the report in any format that I wish. The next way is to actually check in users and groups. Now this is the exact opposite of what we saw, where we can specify the groups that we want. In this case, let's say the administrators group, and any other group, let's say the auditors group. And once I click OK and hit generate, we have the group memberships right in front of us. Right? And this toggle button that you see right here, this magic checkbox, will help you toggle between direct and indirect group memberships. And like always, the information is in front of you. You can check the information that you wish to change, and you can carry out the fix or the management activity fix directly from the place where you've generated the report. So these are the two reports for you to manage group memberships. We also have something called group reports. Now group reports are catered towards group objects. If you wish to manage your group objects with an Active Directory, you have group reports. For instance, if I head into something called detail group members right here, I can select the group that I want, right? Let's say the account operators group. And I can view the information that I wish to see in the end result of the report. In this case, let's say users, right? I wish to see only the members of administrative group and only the inactive users, right? And I do not wish to see these users, or I wish to further filter my users based on certain columns or certain attributes that are there, right? So that this filtering, this granular filtering, can be done based on your users, groups, computers, and your contacts as well. So that's my first point. Monitor your group memberships using your users and groups for users, and group reports using which you can find out detailed information about groups. What do we have next? We have the stale user accounts. And again, if I'm reiterating myself, I apologize, but the only way we can do this is by using PowerShell in Active Directory, but we can never be sure what scripts can bring in, what other changes they may trigger within your organization's infrastructure. But by using AD Manager Plus, all we have to do is simply head into the tool, head into user reports, under reports right here, all right? And we have something called inactive users. So all I have to do is simply specify the time period that I want, or I could specify a custom time period as well. I can add in the OUs that I wish right here, and once I click generate, the information is right in front of us. Right? This will push out all the inactive users in this particular domain from the last 30 days. So let's just give a second for the report to load so I can show you a quick experiment right here. I seem to have a lot of inactive users. Here we are, right? Once the report is loaded, I can simply select the users that I want, like always, and take the corrective action directly from the place where I pushed out the report. Now let me show you something. If I hit search, and let's see if I have any server administrators. Here we are. We have a server administrator user who's inactive from the last year. That's right, from 2019 and 8, this user has been inactive. For those of you who do not know, inactive users are users who are enabled, but they haven't logged on in a long time. So users such as this have to be cleaned up, have to be subject to a cleanup activity. This is a mismanaged permission right here. So I can simply select the user, I can delete, I can disable, or I could move the user to another OU for later cleanup. That would be my second point, right? The tail accounts with an Active Directory. My third point is your user passwords. Right now, your user passwords, like I always say, are the first line of defense for your organization. The first thing an attacker will try and do is to break your user's password. So you need to strengthen your user passwords. It is of utmost and primal importance. So before we go about strengthening user passwords, how do we find out which of our users have weak passwords in the first place? In order to do that, we provide you a free tool called a weak password reporter tool, where you can potentially giving the name of the domain controller, and the username of the admin, and all users with weak passwords would be pushed out in front of you in the form of a report. Now you might immediately ask me a question, right? Where are the passwords taken from? So let me quickly show you something right here. If I open up my notepad file, you can see that I have something called passwordpatterns.txt. These are all the weak passwords that are being used in my organization, right? These are the weak passwords that I am using to run a weak password check within my organization. So I can add in my own set of weak passwords to this, or I could specify more text files if I wish as well. Right, so what the tool does is it potentially takes all of those weak passwords, converts the password into NT hashes, and takes the NT hashes from Active Directory, compares both of them, and if they match, right, it will be pushed out in the form of a report because the hash is that of a weak password specified within the notepad file right here. So that's the first step. Find out your weak user passwords. What's the next step? You need to find out more details about your passwords, right? Just finding out users with weak passwords is still step one. So we have something called password reports right here, where you can find out users who haven't changed their passwords in a long time. Now users may have strong passwords, but if users haven't changed their passwords in a long time, that is a security risk. And here we have a user called Superman right here who hasn't changed his password from the last 351 days. Similarly, we have other reports such as password change users. Users who are changing their passwords frequently is also a security risk, and users who have password never expires. Now typically in organizations, service accounts are given this, so services are never interrupted, but it's also important to remember that no matter what the service account, passwords have to be changed periodically because there are attacks that are catered towards service accounts. For example, Kerber roasting. Right? We have something called recent logon failures here where you can find out all invalid authentications that have been taken place. So in short, this report right here can help you find complete details about your passwords within your organization. Number 4, the true last logon of your user. Now whenever activities happen within an organization, right? Whenever suspicious activity happens, the first thing as an admin or a help desk is to find out the true last logon of your user. Now this becomes extremely difficult in multiple domain controller environments because you potentially do not know from where the user has logged on. Right? So you'll have to check in each domain controller to determine the last logon. In short, you need to check for the last logon time across each domain controller. But in AD Manager Plus, we have a report called the real last logon report, using which you can find out a user's real last logon. That's right, even in a multi-DC environment. Right? And number 4, we have user creation and modification. Now, this is something I would want all of you to monitor. This is extremely paramount because users, when created, need to be known to the admin, right? A help desk technician is simply creating a user and adding that user to an admin group, or a bunch of new users are being created within the organization and are given privileged permissions, right? No matter who the user is, no matter what the permission or the group membership of the user is, the admin must be aware at all times. And also, the admin must be aware of illegal user modifications, manipulation of user properties, thereby giving them access that they are not supposed to have. It could be a process mistake. It could be for a temporary while. No matter what the reason, we need to be on our toes at all times. And in AD Manager Plus, we have a report called Now, using this report, you can find out all users who were recently created, for instance, in this week or the last 7 days, and you can specify the time that you wish as well. Right? And here we can see that we have a backdoor attacker user recently created. Now, activities like this are something I would want you to track using AD Manager Plus. So once you have this, all you have to do is simply select and conduct the cleanup activity. Clean up this mismanaged vulnerability and be secure. We have something called recently created users, and we also have something called recently modified users that does the same job, but only checks for users that are modified. For instance, the admin was last modified, wherein a group membership was added or removed. All right, and finally, I would ask you to take care of the extras, the fat. Right? Users are often created in bulk during onboarding processes, and users are not always used. Right? And groups are created in bulk during onboarding processes. OUs are created in bulk. Permissions are given liberally, but it's not the fact that all of these user accounts are used at all times. Right? And these user accounts are what attackers look for. Now, let's say there are 10 test users created within your organization, and 9 of them aren't used. An attacker will potentially catch hold of one test user because typically these accounts, the passwords for these accounts haven't been changed in a long while because they haven't been used. An attacker could potentially get hold of one of those accounts and log into the domain without raising a threat, because to us it would look as though a test user is logging in. Right? So this is how we can clean up the extras, the fat that has never been used in Active Directory using Manager Plus. And we have something called the users never logged on report right here. Right? So if I click generate, this will push out all users in the organization who have been created, who are potentially enabled, but they haven't logged on. They have never been used yet. So you can find out the report right here. You can make the changes that you wish. And again, the management fix, right? Here we are. I can select the users that I want, and the fix can be carried out directly from the place where I've generated the report. So these are a few places that I would ask for you to look for valuable insights. Group memberships, inactive users, user passwords, user creation or modification, and user accounts that have never been used, and finally, the true last logon of users. What's next? Right? We just saw a few places where mismanaged vulnerabilities commonly occur, and we fix them with management practices or directly from the place where we've generated the report. We also need to automate a few things, right? Because going in and selecting the report and generating it is too much work, right? We need to make the process more efficient. We need to make the process more easy for us as administrators. That's the whole point of a tool, right? So we have something called automation right here, using which we can automate the entire cleanup process. For instance, the inactive user cleanup, right? The stale users are taken from the inactive users report and cleanup activities are conducted. For example, the users are disabled and moved to another OU and deleted, and this is not just across Active Directory, but also across Office 365, and Exchange, and Skype for Business if you have third-party applications such as that. And similarly, we have something called template-based hybrid user creation. Now, generally during onboarding, right, let's say the admin just gets a call today saying you need to onboard 100 users. Now, during times such as this, what happens is that the admin does the process manually, right? Like I said before, using the ADUC tool, and that gives birth to many, many problems. So using AD Manager Plus, the entire user creation process, right from user creation, assigning group memberships, across your hybrid applications as well, can be done using template-based hybrid user creation. What do we have next? We need to secure our permissions. That's right. Securing permissions is of utmost importance. Gaining insights into the critical parts of our infrastructure and securing them was just what we did, and we've automated the process for easier cleanup or easier management of risk-managed vulnerabilities, but we also need to secure our permissions. Permissions across our security objects and our files and folders. Now, why am I saying this? Because your files and folders potentially hold company-sensitive data, the gold, the currency of your organization. And it's also important to know which user has permissions over which object in Active Directory. For instance, which user can change the domain admin group membership, who can reset the password of every domain admin, who can perform replicating changes within Active Directory. So that's two places where we need to secure our permissions, on our security objects and our files and folders. And this is how it can be done in native Active Directory. Right? So if I head into my VM right here, the only way we can check permissions of users is to right-click on an OU or any security object for that matter, head into Properties and head into the Security tab. And again, like I said, ADUC is too monotonous, where this process has to be repeated over and over again. And that is how permissions can be secured. Right? But we also have another method offered by Microsoft, which is right here. This is my domain node. If I right click on the domain node, head into Properties and head into Security and Advanced Permissions. I apologize for the delay. My VM is a little slow. So what we would have here is, once I head into Advanced Permissions, we will have something, here we are, called Effective Access, where I can potentially select a user that I want, let's say Luna, and once I click View Effective Access, Luna's permissions over Active Directory are right in front of us, right? So these are Luna's permissions over the OUs, but this information is very limited. Now, why do I say that? There are two reasons. Number one, we do not know the names of the OUs, right? And number two is that these permissions only have information about the parent OUs and not the sub-OUs. And we're just talking about OUs here. What happens to permissions over individual users or individual groups or individual servers? We need to find that as well, right? And the only way we can do it for our files and folders is by, again, right-clicking on a particular file or folder and finding the group membership. Finding the permissions. For example, I have my labs folder right here. Properties and security, and this repetitive process repeats all over again. So how do we go about fixing permissions with an Active Directory? So this is how we do it, right? If I head into AD Manager Plus, right here, let me quickly log in. We have something called reports, right? That's where we've been so far, where we saw a few user reports, password reports, and we have something called security reports right here, using which we can find permissions over specific security objects within Active Directory. For instance, if I head into AD objects accessible by accounts, here we have a user Luna and Luna's permissions over all objects within Active Directory. That's right, your users, your servers, your groups, you name it. Similarly, we have servers accessible by accounts or server permissions, or we could search for permissions as well. For instance, I have my OU right here, and I have my user. It could be a group or it could be a computer. And I have a permission, and once I click generate, Luna's permissions over that OU are right in front of us. And the cherry on the cake here is that the sub-OU permissions are also here. For instance, if I head into Brooklyn support right here, you can see that Luna can change the group memberships and reset passwords over the Brooklyn support OU, which is a member, right, which is a child of the parent OU, which is Support New Australia. This was something Active Directory could not do. So that's security reports for permissions for all of your security objects, and we also have NTFS reports for permissions over our files and folders. For instance, if I head into folders accessible by accounts, we have an account right here. We are checking for folders within this domain controller and this path. We can specify the subfolder level if we wish, let's say 50 subfolders, and specify the access type or select an advanced access type. And once we click generate, the information is right in front of us, and you can see that Luna has access over the company confidential folder, but also the subfolders 1, 2, and 3, and we can view the advanced permissions by simply clicking the permissions right there. Now this information can be exported in any format that you wish right here, CSV, PDF, you name it, and the end result of the report can be modified as well by adding the attributes that you wish or removing the attributes that you wish to see in the result of your report. But how do we secure these permissions, right? I would recommend two methods to secure these permissions. Number one, implement least privileged access. Give your users the access that they need, nothing more, nothing less. And this works for all of your Active Directory objects, files and folders, everything. Your users only must have the access that they need. And the other method that I would ask you to do is to set time-based access. For example, users added to a group, right? Users must be added to a group only for a specific time or for the amount of time they need the access for, post which the access must be automatically revoked. And the same logic applies for your files and folder permissions as well. So that's two tips to secure permissions. Implement least privilege access and set time-bound access. At the moment, we do not support setting permissions or managing permissions on our security objects, but we have something called file server management right here, using which you can manage your permissions over all your files and folders. That's right, your NTFS files and folders, your shares, permissions across all file servers within your organization can be managed, where under configuration, you just add in the file server that you want or multiple file servers that you want. And once you have added in the file servers, right? I have two file servers right here, as you can see. All you have to do is head into modify NTFS permissions or any other option that you wish. And you can modify permissions for all files and folders within that file server. For instance, I can select multiple folders here. I can specify multiple permissions here. And once I click modify, the permissions are changed. We also have separate checkboxes. For instance, remove all existing permissions and let only these permissions apply. And we also have something called copy from folder right here, where permissions can be copied from an already existing folder and can be applied to this folder. This can come very handy the times when we already have least privilege access implemented, or times when we've already set up least privilege access on a folder and we would want those permissions or those ACEs to replicate across all files and folders. So this can act as a potential recording button for your Active Directory. And not just that, we also have separate checkboxes. For example, again, remove all existing permissions and given the permissions that you have specified right here. That can help you restructure the permissions for your files and folders within your organization. And this one tab, right, the file server management tab right here can help you achieve that. What's next? If I head into workflow right here and head into create request, right? We have something called add users to a group. Now here, users can be added to a group based on a particular time, for instance, 30 minutes. So post 30 minutes, the user's group membership is automatically revoked. And similarly, we have something called set folder permissions as well, using which you can add a user permission, give a user permission over a folder, which is again time-based. This can help you avoid mismanaged permissions because the access is revoked after the set time. So you don't have to remember to manage yourself. Now, if I head into business workflow here, this is how the entire workflow works, where a requester can simply request for a permission, right? In this case, adding a user to a group or giving a user permission to a particular file and folder. And then you can set up a reviewal process where it goes through multiple people, and only when the executor approves will the activity be carried out. So this is not just blind time-based permissions, but it will go through multiple reviewers and approvers within your organization. Now, a reviewer and approver can be anyone, and a requester can be any Active Directory user. All you have to do is just create the requester within AD Manager Plus, and you are good to go. Right, so that's two ways you can secure your permissions on your Active Directory objects and files and folders: least privileged access and time-bound access. And just a quick recap, if I head into my reports, we have something called NTFS and security reports, using which you can find permissions for your files and folders and your Active Directory security objects. And we have something called file server management, using which you can reset your permissions across all your files and folders. And finally, we also have something called workflow, using which you can set time-bound permissions, but at the same time, it goes through multiple people. So a quick summary of what we saw. We saw how a single mismanagement action, right, a single wrong file permission, a single group membership, a single GPO setting could potentially be a reason for a large-scale security breach, or can increase the radius of a breach, can help in the spread of a breach. So in order to overcome mismanaged permissions with an Active Directory, we set up a structured approach where first we gained insights onto the critical parts of our infrastructure, important places like passwords, group memberships, user activity, right? Users, from where users have logged on, and how long users have been enabled, and how long their accounts have been enabled but haven't been used. So by looking into places like this, we gained insights, and we potentially conducted cleanup activities at different parts. Post which, we also secured our permissions on our Active Directory objects and our files and folders, using the ready-made reports that we have, security and NTFS reports, and by using the management tab. And also by setting time-based access. Are we done yet? Just one more step, right? It's always important to have a backup and a recovery plan in place. So using AD Manager Plus, admins can back up all changes with an Active Directory. The changes can be big or small. An Active Directory can be restored to its original state without even restarting the domain controllers. So if I quickly head on to my AD Manager Plus console right here and head into backup, this is what we have. This will take just, here we are, right? So these are backups that I've conducted on my Active Directory environment. If I head into restore, you can see now that I can potentially select the object that I want, and I can restore the changes, right? And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a restart free backup. For instance, I have an OU right here. And once I head on this, once I click the changes, I can for all of your objects, your users, your groups, your OUs, your DNS nodes, and your group policies as well. You could schedule full backups if you wish, or you could have incremental backups as well. So a quick recap of what we saw, right? We saw that mismanaged activities in Active Directory or mismanaged permissions can lead to breaches or can help in the spread of breaches, post which we learned to gain insights into our infrastructure where mismanaged permissions or mismanaged activities commonly occur. And once we gain the insights, we fix them using the built-in actions within the report, post which we also secured our permissions on our files and folders. And how did we secure them? Using least privileged access and by setting time-bound permissions. And finally, we also set up a backup plan in place. right? Once we've cleaned up, once we've fixed all the mismanaged permissions in our Active Directory, I would encourage you to run a backup scan on your Active Directory just so you can jump back, right? So it acts like a safety net should something unfortunate happen, should something catastrophic happen, should you be hit by a breach that has caused irreversible changes within your Active Directory environment. So thank you so much for listening. I hope you found the webinar informative. If you have any questions, you could always reach out to me on my email at abi@manageengine.com. That's abi@manageengine.com, and I would be more than happy to help you out. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful, wonderful day ahead.